The neon Budweiser sign flickered erratically above the bar, casting intermittent red shadows across Maya Chun's face as she nursed her third whiskey of the night. The Rusty Anchor wasn't the kind of place decent people frequented after dark, which was exactly why she'd chosen it. The dive bar reeked of stale cigarettes, spilled beer, and broken dreams. Its patrons a collection of society's forgotten and discarded. Maya preferred it that way. Anonymous, invisible, safe. She'd been coming here for 3 months now. Ever since she'd returned to San Diego and rented the studio apartment above the Korean barbecue restaurant. The owner, Mrs. Park, asked no questions and accepted cash, which suited Maya perfectly. During the day, she worked at Grind Coffee, a hipster cafe near the university where college kids complained about their organic chemistry exams and sorority drama. At night, she came here to drink away the memories that therapy couldn't touch. The leather jacket she wore had seen better days, cracked and faded from years of wear, with a small seal trident pin attached to the left lapel. It had belonged to someone else once, someone who died in a place that didn't officially exist. Maya had kept it as a reminder, though of what, she wasn't entirely sure anymore. "Hey there, sweetheart." The voice cut through her thoughts like a rusty blade. Maya didn't look up from her glass, but she could smell him motor oil, cheap cologne, and the particular brand of aggression that came from too much testosterone and too little intelligence. "You look lonely over here all by yourself." 3 of them had been eyeing her from across the bar for the past hour. Bikers. Judging by the leather vests adorned with patches declaring their allegiance to the Iron Wolves, Massey. The leader was a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks and a beard that hadn't seen a razor in months. His companions flanked him now, forming a semicircle that blocked her exit route to the front door. "I'm fine, thanks," Maya said quietly, not looking up. Her voice carried no fear, which seemed to confuse them. Most women would be trembling by now. "Ah, come on now," the leader continued, his breath hot against her ear as he leaned closer. "Name's Tank. These are my boys, Razor and Diesel. We're just being friendly." His massive hand landed on her shoulder with enough force to make a normal person wince. Maya didn't move. The bartender, a grizzled ex-con named Murphy, glanced over him nervously but made no move to intervene. He'd learned long ago that getting involved in other people's problems was bad for business and bad for his health. "I said I'm fine." Maya's tone remained level, but something in her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Her feet found better purchase on the floor, her center of gravity lowered slightly. Old habits. Tank's grip tightened. "You know what I think? I think you're being rude. My boys and I, we don't like rude." He gestured to his companions, who stepped closer. Razor, a wiry man with prison tattoos covering his neck, cracked his knuckles. Diesel, built like a linebacker gone to seed, blocked the path to the restrooms. "Look," Maya said, finally turning to face them. At 5'2" and barely 110 pounds, she looked like a child next to these men. "I just want to drink in peace. Find someone else to bother." Tank laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "Or what? You gonna call the cops?" He leaned down until his face was inches from hers. "This ain't exactly the kind of neighborhood where they come running, princess." That's when Maya made her first mistake. Her hand moved instinctively to the trident pin on her jacket, a nervous gesture she'd developed over the past few months. It was barely noticeable, but Tank's eyes followed the movement. Wow, he said, straightening up with a grin that revealed several missing teeth. "What do we have here?" He flicked the pin with one dirty finger. "Navy SEAL, huh? That's cute." Maya's jaw tightened. "I'm military," she said quietly, hoping the admission would be enough to make them back off. Most people, even the worst of them, still had some respect for the uniform. The 3 bikers exchanged glances. before erupting into laughter that echoed through the dingy bar. Other patrons turned to stare, some chuckling along with the joke they assumed was being told. "You?" Tank wheezed, wiping tears from his eyes. "A Navy SEAL? Sweetheart, you're what? 5 foot nothing and 100 pounds soaking wet. I've seen bigger Girl Scouts. The SEALs wouldn't let you carry their jock straps," Razor added, his voice high and nasal. "What's next? You gonna tell us you're a Green Beret too?" Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd had during those first weeks back stateside when everything felt wrong and nothing made sense. The therapist at the VA had called it adjustment disorder, as if her entire life could be reduced to a clinical term in a manila folder. "I am military," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Bullshit," Diesel spat. "You're just another wannabe playing dress-up. Stolen valor, that's what this is." He turned to address the bar. "Hey, everybody, we got ourselves a fake soldier over here." The attention was the last thing Maya wanted. She could feel eyes on her from every corner of the room, judging, evaluating, finding her wanting. Her breathing became shallow, and she gripped her whiskey glass tighter. That's when someone at the far end of the bar pulled out their phone. Maya didn't see who made the call, but she heard fragments of the conversation over the biker's continued taunts. Stolen valor, Navy SEAL pin, young woman, rusty anchor on 5th Street. The military police arrived faster than she'd expected. The bar's front door burst open with enough force to rattle the windows, and 4 MPs in crisp uniforms stormed in like they were raiding a terrorist stronghold. Their leader, a staff sergeant with the kind of bearing that came from years of dealing with military discipline, surveyed the scene with practiced eyes. "Military police," he announced, his voice cutting through the bar's ambient noise like a blade. "We received a report of stolen valor in progress." The bikers stepped back, suddenly eager to distance themselves from the situation they'd helped create. Tank raised his hands in mock surrender. "Not us, officer. It's her." He pointed at Maya, who sat frozen on her bar stool. "Little girl there's been claiming she's a Navy SEAL." The staff sergeant approached Maya with the kind of measured steps that suggested he'd done this before. His nameplate read Morrison, and his eyes held a particular brand of disgust reserved for those who dishonored the uniform. "Ma'am, I'm Staff Sergeant Morrison, United States Military Police. I need to see some identification." Maya reached slowly for her wallet, her movements careful and deliberate. She handed over a California driver's license without a word. Morrison studied it briefly. "Maya Chan, 26, civilian address." He looked up at her. "Ma'am, are you currently serving in any branch of the United States military?" Maya met his gaze steadily. "No. Have you ever served in the United States military?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Maya's throat felt dry despite the whiskey. "Yes. What branch and unit?" Maya's lips pressed together in a thin line. She couldn't answer that question. Not here. Not to him. Not to anyone. Morrison's expression hardened at her silence. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stand up and place your hands behind your back." As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Maya didn't resist. She'd been in worse situations than this, though none quite so surreal. The bar had gone completely silent, except for the sound of Morrison reading her rights. "You have the right to remain silent." Maya almost smiled at the irony. She'd been silent for months now. What was a little longer? The fluorescent lights in the Naval Base San Diego detention facility hummed with the kind of persistent buzz that could drive a person insane after hours of exposure. Maya had been sitting in the sterile holding cell for 6 hours now, her wrists still bearing the red marks from the handcuffs. The MPs had processed her with military efficiency. Fingerprints, photographs, personal effects cataloged and stored. Her leather jacket hung on a hook outside the cell, the SEAL trident pin glinting mockingly under the harsh lighting, through the reinforced glass window. She could see the duty officer's station where Staff Sergeant Morrison sat typing up his report. Every few minutes, he'd glance in her direction with the kind of contempt usually reserved for child molesters and traitors. To him, she was both someone who'd stolen the honor of better men and women for her own pathetic purposes. The door to the detention area opened with a pneumatic hiss, and Commander James Phillips strode in carrying a thick manila folder. Maya had seen his type before, career officer, probably Naval Academy. The kind of man who'd never seen real combat but wore his rank like armor against a world that didn't appreciate his sacrifice. His uniform was immaculate, every ribbon and decoration positioned with mathematical precision. "Open it up, Morrison," Phillips ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The cell door slid open with an electronic beep, and Phillips entered, setting the folder on the small metal table bolted to the floor. He remained standing, using his height advantage to establish dominance, another textbook interrogation technique that Maya recognized from her own training. "Maya-chan," he began, opening the folder with theatrical precision. 26 years old, born in Sacramento, California. Parents deceased car accident when you were 19. No siblings. Graduated from UC San Diego with a degree in international relations. Worked various retail jobs before your current position at... He paused to check his notes. Grind coffee on Garnet Avenue. Maya sat perfectly still, her posture unconsciously military despite her civilian clothes. Her hands rested flat on the table, fingers spread. Eyes focused on a point just over Phillips' left shoulder, a position that allowed her to monitor his movements without appearing to stare. "What's interesting," Phillips continued, beginning to pace in the small space, "is what's not in this file. No military service record. No SEER training. No security clearance. No deployment history. Nothing that would suggest you've ever been within 100 miles of a military installation, let alone qualified as a Navy SEAL." He slammed the folder shut, the sound echoing off the concrete walls like a gunshot. Maya didn't flinch. "Do you know what real SEALs go through?" Phillips leaned forward, his face inches from hers. 24 weeks of the most brutal training known to man. Hell Week, 5.5 days of continuous training with a maximum of 4 hours of sleep total. Hypothermia, exhaustion, men twice your size washing out because they can't handle the pressure. Maya's breathing remained steady, controlled. In through the nose, out through the mouth, just like she'd been taught. Phillips mistook her calm for arrogance. "But Bud has a 75% attrition rate," he continued, his voice rising. "Grown men, athletes, Marines, who thought they were tough, they ring the bell and quit because they can't hack it. And you want me to believe that someone like you made it through?" Still no response. Maya's eyes remained fixed on that point behind his head, her expression neutral. It was a look Phillips had seen before in prisoners of war footage, the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd learned to disconnect their mind from their body. "Where did you serve?" Phillips demanded. "What was your unit? Your commanding officer? Give me something, anything that proves you're not just another pathetic wannabe looking for attention." Maya's lips moved for the first time since entering the cell. "Chun Maya, Lieutenant, United States Navy, service number 7742981. Phillips blinked, caught off guard by the response. The format was correct name, rank, service number. It was exactly what a real service member would say when captured. But it was also exactly what someone who'd done their homework would know to say. "That's not an answer," Phillips said, recovering his composure. "I want details. Dates, locations, mission parameters." "Chun Maya, Lieutenant, United States Navy, service number 7742981. The repetition was word perfect, delivered in the same flat tone, Phillips felt a flicker of uncertainty. He'd interrogated dozens of stolen valor cases over the years, and they usually broke down quickly when pressed for specifics. They'd stammer, make up elaborate stories, or break down crying. They didn't respond like prisoners of war. "Look," Phillips said, changing tactics and sitting down across from her. "I get it. Maybe you wanted to impress someone, or maybe you're dealing with some personal issues. PTSD from civilian trauma, maybe? We can work with that. But this charade ends now." Maya's eyes finally moved, focusing on his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. For just a moment, Phillips saw something in those dark eyes that made his blood run cold. A depth of experience that didn't belong in someone so young. A hardness that came from places most people never went. "I want my phone call," Maya said quietly. Phillips laughed, but it sounded forced even to his own ears. "Call whoever you want. Your barista friends? Your college buddies? No one's going to save you from federal prison, sweetheart." "I want my phone call," Maya repeated, her voice unchanged. "Fine." Phillips stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete floor. "Morrison!" "Get her a phone. Let her call whoever she wants. Maybe reality will set in when nobody comes to help her." As Phillips left the cell, he paused at the door. "You know what really pisses me off about people like you? Real SEALs are dying overseas right now. Men and women who earned that trident through blood and sacrifice. And you're sitting here playing dress-up like it's some kind of game." Maya's response was so quiet he almost missed it. "I know." Something in her tone made Phillips turn back. But Maya had already returned to her 1,000-yard stare, her hands flat on the table, her breathing controlled and steady. 20 minutes later, Morrison brought in an old rotary phone, the kind that belonged in a museum. He set it on the table with unnecessary force, the bell inside ringing softly. "You get one call," he said. "Make it count." Maya stared at the phone for a long moment, her fingers hovering over the rotary dial. She knew the number by heart, had memorized it during those final weeks of debriefing, when they'd told her it was for emergencies only. Real emergencies, they'd emphasized. Life or death situations. She dialed slowly, each number clicking into place with mechanical precision. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, a voice answered crisp, professional, with the kind of authority that came from years of command. "Admiral Blackwood's office. This is Petty Officer Martinez." Maya closed her eyes, feeling something inside her chest loosen for the first time in months. "This is Ghost Tide 7. I need to speak with the Admiral immediately." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of papers rustling. "Ghost Tide 7, please hold for authentication." Maya waited, listening to the silence on the line. Through the glass, she could see Phillips and Morrison watching her with expressions of barely concealed amusement. They thought she was calling a friend, maybe a family member who would try to post bail for a crime that carried no bail. They had no idea she'd just activated a protocol that would send shockwaves through the highest levels of naval intelligence. "Ghost Tide 7, the voice returned. "You are authenticated. Transferring to Admiral Blackwood now." The line clicked, and Maya heard the familiar voice that had haunted her dreams for months. "Maya? Jesus Christ, where are you?" Admiral Sarah Blackwood's hands trembled as she set down the secure phone in her Pentagon office. The call had lasted exactly 97 seconds, long enough for Maya to explain her situation in the clipped, efficient language they both learned to use when discussing matters that officially didn't exist. Long enough for the Admiral to realize that 4 years of the most classified operation in naval intelligence history was about to unravel in a military courtroom in San Diego. "Cancel my afternoon," she barked to her aide, already reaching for her service dress blues, hanging behind her office door. "And get me on the next flight to San Diego. Priority Alpha clearance." Petty Officer Martinez looked up from his computer, confusion evident on his young face. "Ma'am, you have the Joint Chiefs briefing at 1500. Cancelled." Blackwood's tone brooked no argument as she pinned her ribbons to her uniform with practiced efficiency. 32 years of service, 3 combat deployments, and more classified operations than she could count had taught her to recognize when the world was about to shift on its axis. And Martinez? This conversation never happened. 3 hours later, Blackwood's staff car pulled up to the Naval Base San Diego courthouse just as the afternoon session was beginning. She'd spent the flight reviewing Maya's file, or rather, the carefully constructed fiction that passed from Maya's file in the official records. The real file was locked in a vault 3 levels below the Pentagon, accessible only to 7 people in the entire United States government. The courthouse was a modest building by military standards, designed more for efficiency than intimidation. Blackwood had been in hundreds of similar facilities over the years, presiding over courts-martial for everything from minor infractions to treason. But she'd never walked into one knowing that the wrong word, the wrong decision, could compromise an operation that had taken 4 years to build and had saved thousands of lives. She paused outside the courtroom doors, listening to the proceedings through the thick wood. Commander Phillips' voice carried clearly as he outlined the case against Maya Chun, his tone dripping with the kind of righteous indignation that came from absolute certainty in one's moral position. "Clear case of stolen valor. Your Honor, the defendant has shown no remorse, provided no credible evidence of military service, and continues to maintain her fraudulent claims despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary." Blackwood pushed through the doors with enough force to make them bang against the walls. Every head in the courtroom turned as she strode down the center aisle, her ribbons and decorations catching the fluorescent light. The silver stars on her collar seemed to gleam with their own inner fire. "Your Honor," she announced, a voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in uniform, Admiral Sarah Blackwood, requesting permission to observe these proceedings. Judge Captain Morrison, no relation to the MP who'd arrested Maya, looked up from his bench with surprise. It wasn't every day that a 2-star admiral walked into his courtroom unannounced. "Admiral, this is highly irregular. This is a routine stolen valor case. Nothing about this case is routine, Captain." Blackwood's eyes swept the courtroom, taking in the scene with tactical precision. Maya sat at the defendant's table, flanked by a young JAG officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Her posture was perfect, back straight, hands folded, eyes forward. To most observers, she looked like a civilian trying to project military bearing. To Blackwood, she looked like an operator maintaining cover, even under extreme duress. "Admiral," Commander Phillips interjected, rising from the prosecutor's table. "With all due respect, this woman is clearly Commander." Blackwood's voice cut through his words like a blade. "I suggest you choose your next words very carefully." Phillips faltered, confused by the Admiral's tone. He'd expected support from a senior officer, not what sounded suspiciously like a warning. "Ma'am, the evidence is overwhelming. The defendant has no military record, no training history. No. May I approach the defendant, Your Honor?" Blackwood asked, ignoring Phillips entirely. Judge Morrison nodded slowly, his legal mind trying to process the implications of an admiral's unexpected interest in what should have been a straightforward case. "Granted." Blackwood walked toward Maya with measured steps, her eyes never leaving the young woman's face. Maya hadn't moved, hadn't acknowledged her presence, but Blackwood could see the slight tension in her shoulders, the almost imperceptible shift in her breathing. After 4 years of running the most dangerous deep cover operation in naval intelligence history, Maya Chum had learned to control every micro-expression, every tell that might give her away, but she couldn't control everything done as Blackwood approached. Maya unconsciously adjusted her position, a nervous habit she'd developed during the long months of debriefing. Her right hand moved to her left forearm, fingers tracing a pattern through the fabric of her sleeve. It was a gesture so subtle that most people would miss it entirely, but Blackwood had been watching for it. "Miss Chun," Blackwood said formally, stopping directly in front of the defendant's table. "Would you please roll up your left sleeve?" Maya's eyes met hers for the first time, and Blackwood saw a flicker of something relief, maybe, or recognition. Maya's hands moved to her sleeve, slowly rolling up the fabric to reveal her forearm. The tattoo was exactly as Blackwood remembered it from the classified briefing photos, though seeing it in person made her breath catch in her throat. To most observers, it would look like an elaborate piece of body art, intricate waves and nautical symbols, woven together in a design that spoke of someone's love for the ocean. But Blackwood knew better. Hidden within the flowing lines were coordinates, dates, and operational codes that had taken the Navy's best cryptographers 6 months to develop. The tattoo was a living map of Operation Ghost Tide, containing information so sensitive that its very existence was known to fewer than a dozen people worldwide. "Jesus Christ," Blackwood whispered, her professional composure cracking for just a moment. The courtroom had gone completely silent. Phillips leaned forward, trying to see what had captured the Admiral's attention. Judge Morrison half rose from his bench, his curiosity overcoming judicial protocol. "Admiral?" he asked, "is there something significant about the defendant's tattoo?" Blackwood straightened, her mind racing through the implications. The operation was supposed to be buried so deep that it would never see daylight. Maya was supposed to have disappeared into civilian life, her service record sanitized, her very existence as a naval intelligence operative erased from official memory. But here she was, sitting in a military courtroom, her cover blown by a bar fight and a case of mistaken identity. "Your Honor," Blackwood said carefully, "I need to request an immediate recess and a classified session. This courtroom needs to be cleared of all non-essential personnel immediately." Philip shot to his feet. "Admiral, I object. This is clearly an attempt to Commander Phillips." Blackwood's voice carried the kind of authority that had sent men into battle and brought them home again. "You are about to step into waters so deep that you'll never find your way back to the surface. I strongly suggest you sit down and remain quiet." Judge Morrison looked between the Admiral and the prosecutor, his legal training warring with his military instincts. In civilian court, he would have demanded explanations, insisted on proper procedure. But this was military justice, and when a 2-star admiral requested a classified session, there were protocols to follow. "Bailiff," he ordered, "clear the courtroom. All observers and non-essential personnel are to leave immediately. This session is now classified under naval intelligence protocols." As the courtroom emptied, Blackwood remained standing beside Maya's table. She could feel the weight of 32 years of service pressing down on her shoulders, the accumulated burden of decisions that had shaped the course of history in ways the public would never know. Maya finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to drink my beer in peace, Admiral." Blackwood almost smiled. After 4 years of the most dangerous undercover work imaginable, after infiltrating criminal organizations that would have killed her without hesitation if they discovered her true identity, Maya Chun had been brought down by a bar fight and a case of mistaken identity. "I know," Blackwood replied softly, "but that was never going to be possible, was it? Not after what you've seen. Not after what you've done." The courtroom doors closed with a final, echoing thud, sealing them all inside with secrets that could reshape the geopolitical landscape if they ever saw the light of day. The silence in the sealed courtroom was deafening, Judge Captain Morrison had dismissed everyone except the Corps participants himself. Commander Phillips, Maya's JAG defender Lieutenant Rodriguez, and Admiral Blackwood. 2 Marine guards now stood at the doors, their presence a stark reminder that what happened in this room would never leave it. Admiral Blackwood moved to the center of the courtroom, her bearing that of someone about to deliver news that would fundamentally alter everyone's understanding of reality. She'd done this before, stood in rooms where the fate of nations hung in the balance, where a single word could mean the difference between peace and war. "Your Honor," she began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels of government. Before I continue, I need everyone in this room to understand that you are now bound by the Official Secrets Act and the National Defense Authorization Act. Violation of these protocols carries a minimum sentence of 25 years in federal prison." Judge Morrison nodded slowly, his legal mind already grappling with the implications. "Understood, Admiral. Please proceed." Blackwood turned to face Maya, who sat with the same perfect posture she'd maintained throughout the proceedings. "Lieutenant Chun, you are hereby released from your operational security protocols regarding Operation Ghost Tide. You are authorized to provide testimony regarding your service record for the purposes of these proceedings only." Maya's shoulders sagged slightly, as if an enormous weight had been lifted from them. For the first time in months, she was allowed to be herself, not the barista, not the civilian, but the naval intelligence operative who had spent 4 years in the deepest cover imaginable. "Thank you, Admiral," Maya said, her voice stronger now, carrying the crisp professionalism that had been beaten into her during training. Commander Phillips looked between them, confusion and growing alarm evident on his face. "Admiral, I don't understand. The defendant has no service record. We've checked every database, because she was never supposed to have one." Blackwood cut him off. "Lieutenant Chun's service record was classified and compartmentalized from the moment she graduated from the Naval Academy." "Naval Academy?" Phillips' voice cracked slightly. "But she went to UC San Diego." Cover story. Blackwood pulled a tablet from her briefcase, its screen displaying classified documents that made Phillips' eyes widen. "Maya Chun graduated 3rd in her class from the Naval Academy in 2019. She was immediately recruited for naval intelligence and spent 18 months in specialized training before being deployed on Operation Ghost Tide." Lieutenant Rodriguez, Maya's defender, leaned forward. "What was Operation Ghost Tide?" Blackwood's expression grew grim. The largest human trafficking network in Southeast Asia was being used to fund terrorist operations across 3 continents. Traditional intelligence gathering had failed. The organization was too insular, too paranoid. They only trusted family members and people who had proven themselves through years of criminal activity. She gestured toward Maya. Lieutenant Chen volunteered for deep cover insertion. She spent 6 months learning Mandarin, Cantonese, and Vietnamese. She studied criminal psychology, money laundering, and weapons trafficking. Then we erased her identity and inserted her into the organization as a low-level courier. Judge Morrison leaned forward, his judicial skepticism warring with growing amazement. "How long was she undercover?" 4 years, Blackwood replied. 4 years of living as a criminal, earning their trust, working her way up the hierarchy. She witnessed things that would break most people. She did things that... Blackwood paused, choosing her words carefully. She did what was necessary to maintain her cover and complete the mission. Phillips was staring at Maya with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. 4 years? She would have been, what, 22 when she started? 21, Maya said quietly. I was 21 when I volunteered. Volunteered? Phillips echoed. Maya met his gaze steadily. They needed someone young, someone who could pass for a desperate college dropout looking for easy money. Someone expendable. She said the last word without emotion, as if discussing the weather. Blackwood continued, her voice taking on the cadence of an official briefing. Lieutenant Chun's intelligence led to the dismantling of 17 trafficking cells, the rescue of over 300 victims, and the disruption of funding streams that were supporting terrorist operations in Syria, Afghanistan, and Somalia. The operation culminated in a coordinated international raid that resulted in the arrest of 47 high-value targets. But the tattoo, Judge Morrison said, clearly struggling to process the information. What's the significance? Blackwood gestured for Maya to show her forearm again. As Maya rolled up her sleeve, the Admiral pointed to specific elements of the design. The waves aren't just decorative. They're a coded map of shipping routes used by the trafficking network. These symbols here represent safe houses and operational centers. The coordinates are hidden in the mathematical relationships between the design elements. She traced a finger along one of the flowing lines. This particular sequence contains the GPS coordinates of the network's primary command center in Myanmar. This section here details the financial structure of their money laundering operation. The entire tattoo is essentially a living intelligence document. Phillips was pale now, the full implications of what he'd almost done beginning to sink in. But why wasn't it removed? Why leave such sensitive information on her body? Because the extraction was supposed to be temporary, Blackwood explained. Lieutenant Chun was meant to return to deep cover after debriefing. The tattoo was her insurance policy if something happened to her handlers, if the operation was compromised. She would still carry the intelligence necessary to complete the mission. Maya spoke for the first time in several minutes, her voice carrying a weariness that seemed far too old for her 26 years. But I couldn't go back. After 4 years of living that life, of being that person, she trailed off, staring at her hands. Post-traumatic stress, Blackwood said, gently. Severe dissociative episodes. Lieutenant Chun had essentially lived as two different people for so long that reintegration became impossible. The decision was made to retire her from active duty and provide her with a new civilian identity. The coffee shop, Judge Morrison said, understanding dawning in his voice. Part of her rehabilitation, Blackwood confirmed. Steady work, normal interactions, a chance to remember what it felt like to be human instead of a weapon. Phillips finally found his voice. Admiral, I had no idea. The charges will be dismissed immediately, Blackwood said firmly, along with any record of these proceedings. Lieutenant Chun's cover identity must be maintained for her own protection. There are still members of that organization who would kill her without hesitation if they discovered she was responsible for their downfall. Maya looked up at the Admiral, and for the first time since the proceedings began, she smiled, a small, sad expression that spoke of relief and exhaustion in equal measure. Does this mean I can keep drinking at the Rusty Anchor? Blackwood actually laughed, a sound that seemed to break the tension in the room. I think we can find you a better bar, Lieutenant. Somewhere the clientele is less likely to question your service record. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. Admiral, what happens now? To Lieutenant Chun, I mean. Now she goes home, Blackwood said simply. She's earned the right to live a quiet life, to be nobody special, to drink her beer in peace. She turned to Maya. But first, we're going to get you the help you should have received months ago. Real help, not just VA counseling sessions. Maya nodded, tears threatening for the first time since her arrest. Thank you, Admiral, for everything. As the courtroom began to empty, Phillips approached Maya hesitantly. Lieutenant, I owe you an apology. I had no idea. You were doing your job, Commander, Maya interrupted. protecting the honor of the uniform. I respect that. Phillips extended his hand, which Maya shook firmly. For what it's worth, you're exactly the kind of person who should wear that trident. As Maya walked out of the courthouse beside Admiral Blackwood, the late afternoon sun felt warm on her face for the first time in months. She was still Maya Chun, barista and civilian. But now she was also Lieutenant Chun, naval intelligence, hero of operations that would never make the history books. Admiral? She said as they reached the parking lot. Yes? I really did just want to drink my beer in peace. Blackwood smiled. I know. The peace is something you have to earn, Lieutenant. And you've earned it 100 times over.